grim Friday morning, Russia actually shelled a nuclear plant overnight in Ukraine, set a fire to it, eventually captured it. The fire is out this morning. The Ukrainians are greatly worried about the cooling reactors there. No signs of increased radiation. But what won't Putin do? What won't he do? Nothing. He will absolutely level the country and radiate it like Chernobyl. And you know what happened with Chernobyl? That cloud moved all over Europe. So we're dealing with the devil here. We're dealing absolutely with an evil dictator. Now, I think Xi is an evil dictator. I know there are other evil dictators around the world, but our number threes are, in order of importance, Xi, Putin, Khamenei. And Joe Biden seems incompetent to deal with any of them. I am mostly astonished that even Nancy Pelosi understands that we've got to ban Russian oil. Cut number 6.
I'm all for that. Ban it.
Ban the oil.
Ban the oil come from Russia. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker.
Now, good. We finally got the speaker to say something right. I don't know how many years she's been speaker, 10 out of the last 16 or 8 out of the last 16. Yeah, 8 out of the last 16. She's been speaker. She got one thing right. She got the most important thing right. I want to take my hat off to Nancy Pelosi, which I've never done in 21 years of this show. She got it right. She knows we cannot buy Russian oil. We are financing the attack on humanity, the war crimes. We are financing shelling of nuclear plants. But Joe Biden says no, no, no. Not going to do it. Tom Cotton teed off last night on Laura Ingraham about this. Cut number 19.
Yeah, Laura, the Democrats are blind ideologues when it comes to oil and gas. I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi has finally come around to what I've been saying for weeks, what so many Republicans say, that we should ban the import of Russian oil and gas. We should not be sending tens of millions of dollars to Vladimir Putin's war machine. Yet she wouldn't replace it with American oil and gas, which would, of course, just mean higher prices at the pump for Americans. Or you have Pete Buttigieg's proposal, which is to ban Russian oil and gas and replace it with Iranian oil and gas. So send billions of dollars to the Ayatollahs who chant death to America. That's just how ideologically opposed they are to American energy. And it also raises another point, Laura. At a time when we're isolating Vladimir Putin in every way, Joe Biden is personally relying on Vladimir Putin to negotiate a bad nuclear deal with the Iranians.
It's actually, Senator Cotton is so on point. I hope he lives on television all weekend long. He'll be back next week with my guest host. I'm going on vacation tomorrow. And the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I will be off for a week. And in that week, I'll be having great guest hosts. Bruce Hooley from Columbus will be in, Mark Davis from Dallas, Kurt Schlichter will be here to give us a soldier's view of what's going on in Ukraine. Ed Morrissey will be back. Ed never gets upset, I think, but Ed has got the softest heart in the business and is a wonderful man. And I'll tell you, when it comes time, I bet you he'd be so angry. I hope Ukraine is still standing when I come back. There will be thousands more dead. Children will be slaughtered. Putin will not have won. But the United States, if we're still buying oil in a week, Joe Biden's numbers should crash. I mean, absolutely crash. Every American Airbnb today suspended everything in Russia and Belarus. They said, no more. And everybody is shining except Joe Biden's White House. Yeah, actually, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You don't hear me talking a lot about Hunter Biden. I'm actually beginning to wonder, what the heck does Putin have on these people? Because that's his lifeline. That's all he has is Russian oil. It's all. So I'm asking you, open up the phones, Ben, 1-800-520-1234. Should we bar the import of oil and gas? Dock workers in the United Kingdom overnight stopped unloading Russian oil. They don't want blood on their hands. Let's come back, not with our hymn, but with blood on our hands, if we can, for the next segment. 1-800-520-1234. Nancy Pelosi gets it. The dock workers get it. I get it. You get it. What is wrong? I mean, it's conspiracy time. Why is Joe Biden? He might just be clueless. The cabinet availability yesterday, he's worn out by the State of the Union. Cut number 1, talking about Ukrainians hiding in the subway. Cut number 1.
In the State of the Union address, I announced that the Department of Justice is going after the crimes of Russian oligarchs. The Attorney General spoke to that earlier. And who line their pockets with Russian people's money, and while Ukraine and the people are hiding in subways from missiles that are being fired indiscriminately in Russian cities.
He's reading from notes. I don't actually, I've got my real worries about the president. Here he is. He says Americans are confused about this conflict. Cut number 2.
That's for the American people, because they're confused out there, understandably. The world is changing so rapidly.
The American people are not confused. The White House and the State Department are confused. They're confused about Iran. Don't do a deal with Iran. And they're confused about buying Russian oil. Nancy Pelosi understands it. Why are we not doing this? Well, Hollywood's not dead yet. They hopefully will be sanctioning Russia along with every other business in America somehow. Maybe we'll have Russians back as bad guys now in the movies. Sonny Bunch joins me, the official movie critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show. It's been a couple of weeks since I talked to Sonny. Good morning, Sonny Bunch. It's a Batman week, so I've got to talk to you even though there's a war underway, because maybe finally American movie theaters are going to be crowded.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet that they'll be pretty crowded, assuming you want to go see the Batman, because that's the only thing that's going to be playing in most of the multiplexes. I mean, you mentioned Hollywood and Ukraine. It is worth noting that all of the major studios now, Universal, Paramount, Disney, Sony, I'm missing one here, have announced that they are going to skip putting movies out in Russia. Warner Brothers is the one I missed. Warner Brothers, of course, has a big movie out this weekend, The Batman. And they said, we're putting a pause on the release of The Batman in Russia, to join the growing international commercial boycott of Russia. So, Hollywood, there's only so much Hollywood can really do. It's not any movie with Russians as the villains. And Russians have never really went away as villains. Russians became kind of the fill-in villains. If you had a script that had, Arab terrorists, there's a decent chance they were going to become Russians at some point in the rewrite process. So they've been pretty constant bad guys over the last few years. But
Sonny, I want to ask you about Batman, but I want to ask you very quickly. You're an astute observer of politics. Even if Hollywood's left wing understands this, that they have to be against Russia, and Nancy Pelosi wants to sanction Russian oil, and everybody in the audience understands if we're buying Russian oil, we're paying for the war. Why do you think Joe Biden won't do it?
Well, I mean, I'm not in Joe Biden's cabinet. You would have to have somebody there. I would assume there are concerns about, gasoline prices spiking, and if I had to guess, it's because if oil is embargoed and gasoline prices spike again, who's going to get blamed for that?
Yeah, gasoline prices in LA are over $6.50 a gallon. It's not like people haven't noticed anyway. It's priced into the politics. But I would think he would actually benefit if he did something strong as opposed to just mirroring whatever Europe did last week.
Yeah, I mean, not your.
Okay, let's talk about the Batman while we've got you. What did you think? Should we go?
So look, here's the thing about the Batman. It is a kind of interesting movie in that it is a 9-figure neo-noir thriller type film, right? Imagine Seven or Zodiac. It's very David Fincher, but it's a hugely budgeted movie because it's a Batman movie. And there are two ways to look at this. One, you just look at it and be like, oh, good, nice, a movie for adults, a thriller, a drama that we can all enjoy. Or you can look at it and be kind of sad, because the only way a movie like this gets made anymore is if it is wrapped up in a comic book property. And I can see both. I can see both angles. Robert Pattinson, who is probably best known as the vampire from Twilight, but has carved out a really interesting career for himself in indie films since then, in movies like The Lighthouse, Lost City of Z, etc. Lots of stuff he's been in. Very good in it. He is the saddest, most emo Batman of all time.
Oh my gosh, the trailer makes him look like a fasting to death political prisoner.
Yeah, I mean, he's like skinny Batman, which is not a thing that you get a lot of. And there is some backstory here. I mean, when he was hired, the director in the studio were like, you got to put on some muscle. you gotta work out, and you gotta look more like Christian Bale did, right? Or
Right.
Ben Affleck did.
Or George
And
Clooney, anyone. We've never had
like-
skinny Batman, emaciated political prisoner Batman before.
he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll do it. And then like 6 months later, he shows up on set and he looks exactly the same. He was not interested in resculpting his body. It gives the whole thing, kind of an interesting affect, since it is supposed to be this is a year 2 Batman story, right? Not a year 1 Batman story. Batman Begins as a year 1 Batman story. And now I'm getting into weird comic book stuff.
By the way, weird comic books. I have no idea how many Batman pictures there are. It seems like there's been a Batman picture every other year.
700.
Yeah, it's like the Bond series, right? But the Bond series is a series.
Well, at least with the Bond movies, there's like one, at any given time, there's one, continuous loop of Bond movies, right? At this point now you've got, there's this new one, there's the Batman, you had the Zack Snyder ones, Justice League, Batman vs. Superman. There was Joker, right? Don't forget Joker, which is, technically...
There's Liam Neeson Batman. That's the Liam Neeson
story.
Batman was my favorite because Liam Neeson was the best villain. I can't, the guy who came from Siberia
Batman
or wherever.
Begins, yeah.
Batman Begins. So he was the best Batman. Was not Liam Neeson wasn't Batman, but it's the best Batman movie.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Batman Begins because the Batman reminds me quite a bit of Batman Begins. The Batman is, I wouldn't describe it as a rehash exactly, but it hits a lot of the same beats and a lot of the same notes, like right down to at the end of the movie, it hints that another villain's going to be coming in the sequel. So we'll see. I'm sure this movie will get a sequel because it will do very well. Look, so Robert Pattinson stars as Bruce Wayne. He is trying to solve the case of the Riddler. The Riddler is committing a lot of really, really terrible murders. In the opening moments, he kills the mayor. Later on, he kills more very important citizens of Gotham. Tries to kill very important citizens of Gotham, and Batman is trying to solve his riddles and figure out, how to stop him, what his ultimate plan is. Along the way, he meets Zoe Kravitz playing Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. I don't think she's ever actually called Catwoman. I think we live in an age where it's too silly to call a character Catwoman. So instead, she is just Selina Kyle, and she wears a cat thief suit with little cat ear type things, but nobody ever says the Catwoman. I don't think. I can't remember. Maybe there's one or two mentions, but and Oswald Cobblepot, of course, the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell in a fat suit here, which is probably those are probably my two favorite performances in this film. Zoe Kravitz and Colin Farrell. They do very good work. It is a very long movie, Hugh. This is a 3-hour movie.
Oh my gosh.
This is a make sure you go to the bathroom before the movie starts movie, because if you don't, you might miss something crazy happening. You might miss Paul Dano's performance as the Riddler going, really over the top and nuts. He plays the Riddler like Heath Ledger played the Joker, and the characters are actually written kind of similarly. If you go back and look at how the Joker worked in The Dark Knight and what the Riddler is doing here. I always like to say that the Dark Knight movies are basically neocon Batman. It's one of the reasons I like them. The Dark Knight is very much a movie about the war on terror and, enhanced interrogation, right? But also surveillance of the city and civil liberties and all that sort of stuff, terrorism, nihilism, that sort of thing. And this is very much a center-left Batman universe, I think. I don't want to. It is what it is. But if you've ever wanted to watch a Batman movie where the Batman talks about, his white privilege,
Oh no!
Got the movie for you. The movie for you here.
No.
So
Oh, no.
Here's my very short 2 cents version of a review is I was never bored by it, even though it is way too long. It is absolutely too long. It has like 4 different endings. There are things that you could trim. It's also weirdly sloppy in places. My one just very brief example of this. Characters in the film continually sarcastically call Batman Mr. Vengeance. They're like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Vengeance." And this is because a scene early in the film, he calls himself. Somebody says, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Vengeance," right, in his Batman voice. But we never see like a viral video, everybody watching it and explaining it. So it just seems like they're saying something that we, the audience, saw, but we have no reason to believe they would have seen. And it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't like it.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
like
And nobody caught
like
that. Aren't
it's
there
3
supposed to
hours
be
long.
people who do edits where they look and say it's non-coherent here because we're assuming evidence not submitted?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that somebody somewhere would have been like, okay, we need this scene here because otherwise
It's a disconnect.
It's 3 hours long and it still feels like it's missing scenes somehow. I mean, is my point.
Is it really
You know,
3 hours long?
Yeah, I mean, with credits, it's if you leave before the end, and there's really there's a little stinger thing at the end, but you really don't need to stick around for that. If you leave when the credits start, it's close to 2 hours and 47 minutes. So you know
That is wild. No wonder. No, the theaters have to have it on every screen, otherwise they won't be able to get anyone in. The turnover.
Well, so-
it's all about turnover of the seats.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be on 4,100 or 4,400 screens. I mean, it's going to be on an enormous number of screens. But what's interesting here, and I'll be quick because I know we're running out of time. AMC has announced that they are going to start. They're going to experiment with variable pricing.
I saw
for
that.
the Batman.
I saw that.
They are going to charge, and I looked it up yesterday because I was curious to see if they were in fact doing it, and they are. It's $1 more to see the Batman, on standard screens in theaters.
It's long overdue.
They're doing this for a couple reasons. Look, number one, the only thing that is selling out regularly in movies anymore are these comic book movies, right? Spider-Man: No Way Home, Shang-Chi. These are the big movies. These are what everybody's coming out to see. So they need to maximize revenue on these films. And as you mentioned, because it's 3 hours long, you only get 2 showtimes per screen, right? So you get a 7 p.m. showing and a 10 p.m. showing. They want to make sure to get as much revenue out of those fewer showings as they can. And people are furious about this. They're like, oh, we're being gouged. And I have a much more sanguine view of this, which is that, look, if you're going to do variable pricing, and you should, I think theaters should do variable pricing. It is the only way to save the theatrical experience. You have to charge people less for less popular movies. So if you want to go see West Side Story now, or if you want to go see Dog this weekend, or if you want to go see Sing 2 or whatever, something else that's in theaters right now, charge people $2 less to go see that. You're not really losing any money because hopefully you'll be encouraging people to come up, but mostly you just don't look greedy. Because this is the problem with what they've done right now. They look greedy. They look like they're saying, "Oh, we're gonna charge people more, and we're gonna get more money from them because that's what we have to do." I understand that, and it's logical, but people hate it. They think they're being gouged.
Yeah, they hate it. Sonny Bunch, you're right. I hope it spreads. I hope Batman does well, even though it's 3 hours. Sonny, thank you. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Follow him on Twitter at Sonny Bunch. Oh, at Loretta, the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, in a grim week. I don't know if Joe's going to try and lift our spirits or bring us back to reality. Good morning, Joe.
Sometimes cringing can do both, so that's what I did a lot of this week, cringing. When this week began, I must admit that I was frightened. But since I heard that speech, I have to say I've been enlightened. What's up is down, what's dark is light, what's bad is really good. It makes me so darn happy that I've finally understood. So drop those sourpusses, friends, and swallow your invective, and try to see the issues from the president's perspective. Disasters can upset you, but only if you let them. The thing to do with failures is to instantly forget them. You can't afford that fill-up or a new electric car, but now I'm sure you realize how much better off you are. Insulin syringes are so dear that people hoard them, and stocks could drop so low that now more people can afford them. Things are so fantastic. Yes, I think you must agree it happens that inflation makes it difficult to see it. Confidence is falling and the deficit is large, but we should all be grateful that adults are now in charge. His hand is on the tiller and the course is sure and steady. Europe's a catastrophe. Thank goodness we were ready. Let's rally round, go get him, till the challenges are met. There's only one thing I'm not sure of. Who are we supposed to get? That's Up and At 'em by Tarzana Joe.
I like Up and At 'em. Even in a grim week, we need to be up and at 'em. Are you going to even talk to my guest host next week?
I talk to anyone about poetry.
Poetry is available at tarzanajoe.com. Are the email requests coming in heavy as the wedding circuit reopens?
Yes, got one yesterday. Can I have a poem by tomorrow?
Good. The economy is real. Stay up all night, Joe. Shakespeare never slept.
That's true. That's true.
Go at it.
The hand of poetry never sleeps.
Will today's offering be posted at tarzanajoe.com?
But of course.
And you can reach Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live from the West Coast. I've told you for years, Robert O'Brien is a dear friend, former law partner, and he told me throughout his service as National Security Advisor, the guy he could rely on was General Keith Kellogg, who was his counterpart on Vice President Pence's team and involved in every major national security decision of the Trump years. General Kellogg has a new book out, War by Other Means, his memoir of 4 years' service in the Trump White House alongside of Vice President Pence. It's available at bookstores everywhere, War by Other Means. You also see him almost every night on Fox News, and he's one of the guys I look up and listen to very closely. General, welcome. It's great to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, thanks for having me. A real pleasure.
General, I want to start by asking you, is there any tie between our Ukraine policy, we're buying Russian oil, I don't understand it, and the fact that we need Russia at the table in Vienna, or they think we need them to do the appeasement deal with Iran? Is that what's driving their reluctance to cut off Russian oil?
No, Hugh, it's really amazing to watch, especially when you've got Nancy Pelosi now saying we should cut it off. I don't know why we're not doing that. It's almost like I can't figure they shouldn't be worrying about any type of escalation or whatever it is. They should just cut it off. I mean, we're pushing Europe to do it, and Europe is starting to figure ways to cut back on oil. We should just go totally cold turkey. There's what we're bringing in the range of 700,000 barrels of Russian oil a day. It's just insanity to me that we're doing it. I mean, if you really want to make Russia pay an economic price, you hit them where it hurts because they're the third largest exporter of energy in the world. Cut them off. And we haven't done it. Somebody's going to have to explain to me the rational decision because I don't see one.
Have you seen the alarming reports out of Vienna that we are close to collapsing in front of the terrorist regime and Iran's demands? And I don't even know how the Russians are getting to Vienna. Preliminary. Did we ease restrictions on their flying there? Did they stay there since Russia shut down? Because the Russians are prevented from flying anywhere right now unless we got them to Vienna somehow.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got them there, but I'm sure honestly, I'm sure diplomatically there's a way to get them there. But I mean, I'm a huge opponent of the Iran nuclear deal, the revised one. I mean, the reason that President Trump tried to get us out of the deal, or actually walked away from the deal, was because that the Iranian nuclear deal, or the JCPOA as we used to call it, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, actually had sunset clauses. They were going to expire anyway. And he kept saying, wait a second, this makes no sense. Once they expire, you've got no leverage on the Iranians to not do and create a nuclear weapon or a delivery system, a reentry vehicle that goes with it. So he says, we've got to figure a way to do that. And nobody could kind of pick up on it. I said, it's ridiculous to go back into a deal because there's going to be no enforcement mechanism. They don't allow IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Commission, to even go in and inspect the most critical sites. So it just makes no sense to me. I have no idea why we're doing this. It's making us feel good. And I think really the reason, Hugh, that we went back into it is because it was anti-Trump. That's the big reason why.
And I think there is an appeasement legacy here, General, that they really believe that the West is spent and we've got to let everyone have their domain and that the Ayatollahs aren't that bad and you give them nuclear weapons, they won't be irresponsible. We're seeing what happens when you give people nuclear weapons. They become completely unimpressible, right? We can't deter anything that Iran does once they get nukes.
Well, here's the worst thing about it is there's the fear of the escalation. You're seeing that right now. Once a nation gets nuclear weapons, then everybody goes, ooh, now we can't really put a lot of pressure on them because of escalation. That's exactly what you do not want to do. And you're putting Israel at a huge, huge disadvantage and risk. Once they get the nuclear capacity and they build a nuclear weapon, they've already got the delivery systems almost in hand because the Iranians, the largest missile fleet in the Middle East, it's going to totally destabilize the Middle East because if they get it, the Saudis are going to get it or they're going to buy it somewhere, and everybody else is going to follow suit. And then you've got this whole concept of escalation. There's going to be an absolute fear of what to do next because you're going to become a hostage to nuclear weapons. We're seeing that today with Russia.
General, you're one of the few people I've heard discuss Russian doctrine to escalate in order to de-escalate. But a lot of the hosts pause, and it confuses them. Would you explain? I don't know if you've been on with people like Martha and Brett at Fox who understand this stuff. But would you explain for my Pittsburgh Steelers fans, especially, what it means to escalate to de-escalate?
Yeah, in Russian military strategy, their whole concept of escalate to de-escalate is meaning you kind of do it's like an overreach. You make something so hard to somebody that they forces them to back off and kind of say, well, we're not going to do this. And they used their concept in the military is to use low yield, sub-kiloton yield nuclear weapons to break contact to do that. So when you talk about it, you have to say, okay, don't think megatonnage or kilotonnage. Think something a lot smaller than that, half a kiloton or lower. We used to do that. We had it actually in the U.S. Army. We had a system that was in the 60s called the Davy Crockett, which was a very small, low-yield tactical nuclear weapon. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's anything tactical about a nuclear weapon. But they use that to somehow break contact, get to everybody's awareness. And so this is the whole intent of a concept to escalate, to de-escalate. Look, I'll give you an example that we used in the Trump administration. When we killed Soleimani, the general from Iran, that was a deliberate escalation to de-escalate because the supreme leader realized he was next on the list. And he said, we're not going to do this. And they immediately backed off on all the attacks that were happening in Iraq and elsewhere.
Except they did fire the ballistic missiles at Al-Assad, right?
Right. And what they did though is the interesting story of that, and Robert O'Brien and I kind of chuckle about it. They called us in advance. They actually called Mike Pompeo, not they, but they called through the intermediaries, which were the Swiss at the time, and they called us and said, "Look, the Iranians said we're going to shoot missiles, but they're going to hit the dirt, and then we're going to be one and done, and then we're going to walk away from it." So we told the president that. So we watched these missiles come in, and they hit dirt.
General, I got to tell you, my son was at Al-Assad at that day. He got away an hour early, and some guys barely got away with their lives. There were injuries. So the Iranians almost escalated to escalate. Yeah,
they did. They nearly. That's true. They did, but they fired so far into the dirt. And the vice president asked me later. Said, "Did they miss deliberately?" I said, "Look, they were shooting away from it. They are tipped. Their missiles are tipped by a system called GLONASS. That's the same as our GPS. If they wanted to hit a housing area, they would have hit a housing area. But they fired them. They sent us a message. They sent it through the Swiss. So in the Situation Room, we watched these missiles come in because we have the overhead capability to do that, the persistent observation. And at the end of it, the president looked up, waited about 10 minutes, said, "Okay, we're done," and walked away. And the Iranians, the next day said, "Okay, we're not going to do it again." But the Iranians were so concerned about our reaction to that. Remember, the next morning, they shot down an airliner coming out of Tehran. Yep. They were so concerned we were going to come back and get them. But we did it. It was a one and done. That's a concept of escalate to de-escalate. We've done it. So the Russians do it. My concern is the Russians do it with nuclear weapons.
So we are not sanctioning Russian oil, General. And so we are, in effect, paying for Putin's atrocities. And now there are reports this morning from Jackie Heinrich, with whom you work over at Fox, that Russian troops are mining nuclear plants to blackmail the whole of Europe. So they are escalating over there. What should we do about the Russian oil imports?
Why? We just need to totally say we are not, the whole world should, we are not going to accept Russian oil or Russian energy. It won't happen immediately because it takes time for that stuff to trickle down. But I think we need to do that. We need to just shut it down. Putin, now I will tell you, Putin's a hard case. I mean, the guy, when he said he was going to go into Ukraine, we should have immediately started upgunning Ukraine because we knew he was going to go. He doesn't bluff. And this is hitting him in the energy sector is going to be critical. It's going to take a time to do it, but the whole world needs to stand united. But it's really hard for the rest of the world, let's say the Germans or the French. The French really don't matter because they're primarily nuclear power. But they look at us and they go, okay, you keep talking big about this, but you keep accepting Russian oil. It makes no sense to us. And then the latest I've heard is that, oh, well, if we cut back on that, we're going to buy Iranian oil. I mean, this is insanity.
We don't need to do that. General, what is the end game here? How do we get this to stop? Obviously, we can collapse the Russian regime, or maybe elements within the Russian government take out Putin, as Lindsey Graham suggested last night. I'm not endorsing. It's against the law, actually, to encourage assassination of anyone, international leaders. I don't know what Lindsay was thinking, but what is the off ramp, as they say, for Putin? Is there one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think we're heading into the second act of a Greek tragedy, and this is maybe where we can look for an off ramp. Is you're going to see fighting in cities. You're going to see tremendous casualties in civilian populations. Kiev's a 3 million population of the city. You're going to try to see an attempted decapitation of a government. Well, that means basically changing the government out. And when that happens, I think the world is going to wake up and go, "Ooh, this is really bad. We need to maybe take some type of measures to protect at least the western part of Ukraine." I did the same thing years ago when I went into Sarajevo. When I was sent in by, at that time, the commander-in-chief of European Command, I took a special ops team in to evaluate what was happening and met up with General Morion, the commander of the UN Protection Force. Came back out of there and said, "Hey, look, we're going to go into Bosnia as the U.S." And then everybody said, "No, that will never happen." It did, because I said the world will not accept a European city, a modern European city, being destroyed by artillery, hundreds of casualties of children, women, destruction of beautiful buildings. They're finally going to say enough is enough. And then what you might see, now this is the answer, is what you might see, even though it's not, talked about maybe in a not such a good idea, is looking at the western part of Ukraine and put a no-fly zone over the western part of Ukraine, say you are not going to advance any further than this, and draw the line and say, okay, where do you want to take this to? That's where we go back into this nuclear escalation or de-escalation of what does he really want to do? Because right now, Hugh, he's committed over 90% of his forces into the eastern part of Ukraine. He doesn't have as we say, he doesn't have the legs to get to the western part of Ukraine right now until he finishes with the eastern part. And I think there's time for us to finally say, this is the time you negotiate, you stop, and maybe that's where we force him to do it by taking some type of global military action in the sense of a no-fly zone. A lot of people say, well, you may have Russian jets against U.S. jets or other jets. Well, that may happen, but somebody has to make a hard call and a hard decision. You can't keep rubbing your hands in a negative manner and hoping against hope that this guy's going to stop. Putin will not stop. He's a thug.
He's a thug. General Keith Kellogg, keep preaching sweet reason over at Fox News. The brand new book by the General is War by Other Means, available at Amazon.com. I just tweeted out the link. Come back, General. Keep coming back. United States Senator Marco Rubio from the great state of Florida, ranking Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, good morning.
You've been doing yeoman's work, and I appreciate how much you're trying to keep us informed. I got a couple of questions for you right off the bat, though. The president will not sanction Russian oil. There are only three explanations. Green fanaticism on climate change. I don't think that's it, because they actually like higher oil prices. Fear of political red wave, or Russia's role in Vienna. And Russia is mediating our, quote, deal, our collapse in Vienna. Is that why we're not sanctioning Russian oil?
Yep, bingo. I mean, that's the third one I think is a big part of it. I mean, one is I think the administration is still trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to sanction Russian oil without adding to the increase in gas prices to Americans. And the other is what you said. And by the way, there's a collateral and ancillary to the thing about the deal with Iran, and that is that if you lift sanctions, that means there'll be Iranian oil entering the marketplace. And something to keep an eye on here is I think that the Russians have an economic incentive at this moment to sort of delay that deal because Russian oil is already being sold at a discount in the market, given how difficult it is to transact business and payment to them right now. So the last thing they want is to see oil prices go down because suddenly there's a new supplier in the marketplace. That new supplier should be us. If someone is going to be selling more oil into the marketplace, it should be America, which has the capacity to do it. We don't need the Russian oil. It's 4% of what we invest every day. It's a lot of money to Putin. We could easily replace it with our own domestic supply if the president would allow it.
Yeah, I had a caller today from Florida. I know Barb was in Ohio. Say, release the fracking. And I think she's right. But I want to go back to my correspondent. The Iranian deal is a legacy thing for the appeasers in this administration. I know Tony Blinken, nice guy, but he just doesn't get it. And Wendy Sherman has never gotten anything right. But the appeasement doesn't explain how the Russians are even getting to Vienna. Aren't they supposed to be prevented from going? Are they just staying there and negotiating via telephone with their order givers in the Kremlin?
Well, I think probably what's happening is that exceptions are being made for diplomatic travel. So that diplomats can either leave places or get to places, Although it's interesting, Lavrov the other day, I think it was in Geneva, could not attend the the fake UN human rights.
Yeah.
He had to do it by video conference. He couldn't get there. But my sense is, I don't know the answer to that, but I think my sense is that they are probably creating an exemption for what they, term diplomatic travel.
Okay, last question on Vienna. Russia is crucial to any deal because they buy the spent fuel. How are they going to pay for this stuff? Russia doesn't have any money now, and we've banned. Are they going to send it direct to Iran? And by the way, my correspondent is one of the best reporters in D.C., and they're mystified. They follow this very, very closely. How does Russia have any role left to play in the Vienna deal, which we shouldn't be involved in? But even if it was a good deal, they couldn't pay for what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's possible they're going to pay with oil. In essence, as a barter type deal, or use Iran as a way to access the market. To sell it through them and then have the transaction happen. Russia is probably working overtime right now to establish an alternative to SWIFT and other payment systems. I mean, given enough time, governments figure out loopholes and ways around restrictions. I mean, it still doesn't solve their problem of 40, almost half their foreign reserves. Something's been underreported, but I don't know if it's 45% of what it is, but with Japan joining, close to half of Russia's national reserves are frozen in foreign bank accounts, which is a big problem. Russia's got a lot. I mean, that economy is in a complete death spiral.
There is a term for what Putin provides to the oligarchs, the roof. It's in Russian, I can't say it. The roof is about to fall in if we push a little bit harder. Are there anti-Putin elements at work within the Russian regime which could bring him down, Senator Rubio?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have a lot of insight into that, to be honest with you. Those kinds of things, generally, when there is some sort of an insider move on a guy, you don't know it till after it's happened. If it's successful, if we know about it, then it's not going to be successful, because, Putin knows about it. But let me say a couple things about it. The first is, it's not that these guys, some of them are his friends, but it's not like these people are buddies. Putin, generally has disdain for these oligarchs and so forth, but they're like the feudal lords that prop up a monarch. They're like these princes that he allows to exist in exchange for their help or loyalty. So if he tells them, if he tells them that I need your company to do this for me as an element of statecraft, they have to comply with his orders, because without that, they'll be charged with some corruption charges and they'll be in jail the rest of their lives. So they're tools that he uses for statecraft, but he'll easily replace an oligarch if need be. That's been the history of it.
Yeah, they're off with their head. All my smart questions, by the way, are coming from Brett Baer. That's who I'm talking with offline. He just said, don't worry, don't disguise it. So Brett he's all over this. And we're talking about the Iran deal. Because honestly, Senator, it doesn't make a lick of sense. What is driving the appeasement of Blinken and Sherman? I don't actually think the president is running that show. I think that's a Blinken-Sherman show. What do you think?
Well, I think part of it is that it is a legacy issue from the Obama administration. A lot of the people involved in this were involved in that. And it was one of the big things that Obama's administration bragged about. And but there's a lot of danger embedded in it. Now, there is no deal that's going to appease either. One of the things that's really damaged the U.S.-Saudi relationship has been how aggressively they've pursued this. I think that's going to get even worse now. I think there's another element we haven't talked about here. There are a lot of countries around the world, I would imagine, right now watching what's being done to Ukraine and saying to themselves, if they wouldn't have gotten rid of their nuclear weapons, or if they had just kept a few,
Yep.
this would not be happening.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're Saudi Arabia now, look, I think if we pull back from all of this and just look at it, not the trees, but the entire forest, we are entering an era now where there are three countries that are arguing that they should be the dominant regional powers, and those around them need to be tributary vassal states. Iran, in the Muslim world, particularly the Middle East, and that includes their influence in Syria, Lebanon, increasingly Iraq, Bahrain, where they don't have the influence, but they want it, places like that. The other is, of course, Russia and Eastern Europe, and then China and the Asia-Pacific region. And their fundamental argument is powerful countries should be allowed to dominate their neighbors and direct what happens in their region. And in the case of Iran, there are not just, ethnic differences between, Arab countries coming under the rule of a Persian country, but sectarian ones as well. These are predominantly Sunni countries, and then you have a Shia hegemon or attempted hegemon who's trying to impose on them. And so these countries in the region are going to push back. I mean, if there is an Iranian weapon or an Iranian capability, there is no doubt in my mind that if there's a Shia bomb, there will be a Sunni bomb at some point, and it won't be hard to get to that.
Yeah, it's just a replay of Pakistan and India. They have to do it to hold off their mortal enemy. Let me ask a couple of quick specific questions, Senator. Has Zelensky actually avoided, to your knowledge, 3 assassination attempts? Are they actually trying to hit him with specificity?
Yeah, I don't know if it's 3 or 5 or 1 or none, but I can tell you that the Russians have for a long time now, have had deep penetrations into the Ukrainian defense systems and security, and so obviously that's concerning. And to get to Zelensky, a lot of people think, well, they could shoot the guy. I mean, they could also poison him. I mean, there's all kinds of things they can do. So obviously there's always concern about that because the Russians have invested many, many years into penetrating the Ukrainian government and having assets in there. And so I don't know how many attempts there have been made or so forth, but I can certainly tell you that if the Russians want to kill him and if they have a chance to do so, they will, and that they'll keep trying to, because eliminating Zelensky from a strategic standpoint is probably, in Putin's mind, one of the most effective things he can do right now.
Now, the second report just came out this hour from NBC that the U.S. is providing some intelligence to Ukraine, but not real-time targeting for fear of being considered a co-belligerent. True or false?
It's a complicated question, and I struggle to talk about it publicly because I'm not quite sure how to structure it in a way that someone could say I'm not giving up something. I also don't think we should be telegraphing what we're doing publicly in that regard to the Russians. That said, I saw what Jen Psaki said yesterday. It is a truthy answer, meaning there are elements of truth to it, but it doesn't capture the full complexity. Suffice it. Let me just put it to you this way. There are both Republicans and Democrats who are actively working and pushing now because we think the administration can do more and be more effective than in that regard than what it's doing right now. And there's some confusion as well about what they're doing right now, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it and work through it, and hopefully we'll make some progress.
Last question, Senator Rubio. Everybody in Florida, more than any other American, remembers 1962 and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Are we at that level of risk in your view? Are we close to are we in September 1962 or October 1962?
Well, I don't know. These things are not exactly comparable, but I can tell you that there is great danger for 2 reasons. The first is you now have 70% of the Russian military power is active and engaged and deployed very close to NATO forces. So the risk of miscalculation or, a lot of for example, these countries are now providing planes to Ukraine. So it would not take much for a Russian anti-air element to confuse a Romanian jet or a Polish jet with maybe one from Ukraine and shoot it down, and suddenly you've got a conflict. The other is, at some point, Putin is going to start targeting these supply convoys. Like all these things that are being provided to Ukraine, they have to be driven in. And at some point, he's going to start bombing these convoys. And so you worry about, what could happen there. I mean, the border isn't as easy to see from the air as it is from the ground. So there's danger there. And then the third is Putin's not the same guy he was 5 years ago. And what I mean by that is that his risk calculus is not the same. There are risks he's willing to take now that he wasn't willing to take a few years ago. And a lot of the people running this whole thing and reacting to it, I don't think fully appreciate it. This guy is not going to accept any outcome. He would rather have World War III than be humiliated or appear to have been backing down to the West. And I think that poses real dangers.
Wow, that's sobering. Senator Marco Rubio, thank you for joining us. Keep coming back. I appreciate the work you're doing every day to keep the American public informed on this.
Thank you.